I tapped the first bell on the bamboo trail, and it didn't ring. I tapped the next one. Nothing. By the third bell, my fingers were shaking, because someone had packed them with mud on purpose, turning the whole warning line into decoration. And then the bamboo behind me rustled, soft, controlled, like a team moving in the dark. That's when I understood. The trail wasn't unsafe because the dogs were there. It was unsafe because the Dholes had learned how to make sure nobody heard them coming. Dhole held the bamboo trail the way a disciplined patrol holds a ridgeline, quiet, coordinated, and so consistent that everything else in the forest adjusted its timing to avoid being in the wrong place at the wrong moment. The trail wasn't marked on any tourist map. It wasn't even a trail in the official sense. It was a narrow ribbon of packed earth threading through bamboo thickets on the lower slopes of the Kachari Hills, used by villagers who gathered firewood and by herders who moved goats between seasonal grazing patches. In the wet months it turned slick and dark. In the dry months it carried dust and the sweet green smell of crushed bamboo leaves. Along that ribbon, every few dozen meters, someone had tied small brass bells to low branches. Not big ceremonial bells, tiny ones, the kind used on cattle and on shrine garlands. The idea was simple. If a leopard slipped through the bamboo, or if a boar charged, the bells would jingle and warn whoever was ahead. It wasn't a perfect system, but it was cheap, and cheap systems are what people build when they don't have better options. For years, the bells worked. More or less. Then the bells stayed silent. Sanathapa noticed first because she noticed everything. She was 26, a community health worker assigned to 3 scattered villages along the hill road. Her job was to visit families, check on pregnancies, monitor vaccines, and convince old men to take blood pressure pills even when they insisted they felt fine. She travelled by motorbike where the road allowed and by foot where the road ended, carrying a canvas bag with forms, soap, rehydration salts, and a cheap stethoscope that still did its job if you treated it gently. Sana wasn't afraid of the forest, but she respected it. She grew up here. She knew where the leeches hid after rain. She knew which trees dropped slippery fruit. She knew the difference between a monkey alarm call and a bird just showing off. She also knew the bamboo trail because it was the fastest way between Mangal and Jorathang when the river path flooded. She walked it 2 or 3 times a week. The bells were part of her mental map. The first bell was a small one tied near the fallen log. The second was on a branch that leaned like an elbow over the path. The third was near the bend where the bamboo grew so dense you could barely see sky. Sana used those sounds without thinking. A faint jingle meant a goat had wandered through. A louder jangle meant someone was coming toward you. And sometimes a sharp, frantic ringing meant move off the trail and give whatever that is some space. On the morning the bells stayed silent, Sana realized it at the second bell. She had stepped over the fallen log and brushed past the first bell without hearing it ring. That didn't mean much. Wind direction, luck. Maybe the bell's knot had shifted, but at the second bell, she deliberately reached out and flicked it with her finger as she passed. She always did that, a small habit like knocking on wood. It didn't sound. Sana stopped. The bell hung there, dull and still. She lifted it and shook it gently. It moved, but the clapper inside didn't strike. The metal felt oddly heavy. She brought it closer to her face and frowned. Something had been stuffed inside the bell. Mud, packed tight, smoothed as if pressed in with a stick. Sana's stomach tightened. She moved to the third bell near the dense bend. Same thing, mud packed into the bell's mouth. Silent. A chill ran through her, not because she believed in ghosts, but because she believed in cause and effect. Someone, or something, had silenced the bells on purpose. Who would do that? Not a person. The bells were for people. Even thieves and trespassers liked warnings. It was the kind of shared safety measure villagers didn't mess with lightly. Something else. Sana's eyes scanned the trail ahead. Bamboo rose on both sides like walls. The light inside was greenish and dim, with bright slashes where sun found gaps. The wind was minimal. The forest held its breath. Then she smelled it, a faint musky scent underneath bamboo sap and damp earth. Not cow, not goat, not human sweat. Dog, but wild. Dhole. The name sat in her mind with weight. Dholes, Asiatic wild dogs, were not common here like monkeys or boar. They were seen occasionally, usually in the upper forest, moving in packs that left little time for stories. People argued about them the way people argued about leopards. Some swore they'd seen a red pack cross the ridge at dusk, others swore it was just village dogs gone feral. The older herders treated dhole sightings like weather signs, not a daily event, but meaningful when it happened. Sana had never seen one up close. She had seen tracks once in mud near a stream, small dog-like prints in a cluster, moving with purpose. She remembered the way the local ranger had explained it. Dholes hunted in packs and used trails like corridors. They weren't usually interested in people, but they were bold around livestock, and they were smart. Smart enough to learn bells meant humans. Smart enough to silence them. The idea felt strange, almost too clever, but Sana couldn't dismiss it after seeing the mud packing. Mud didn't jump into bells on its own. She took a slow breath and forced herself to think like she always did when things felt uncertain. Reduce risk, increase information, avoid panic. She stepped off the main ribbon of path onto the side where bamboo leaves formed a softer mat. She crouched and looked at the ground carefully. At first she saw only scattered leaf litter and the faint line of human foot traffic. Then, near the edge of the packed earth, she spotted prints. Not boot prints. Paw prints. Small, tight, with a narrow pad and toes spread in a forward line. More than one set, overlapping, heading the same direction along the trail. A pack had moved through. And not long ago. The edges were still crisp in the dust. Sana's pulse quickened, but she kept her breathing slow. She was alone. She was on a narrow corridor. If the pack was nearby, she didn't want to surprise it. Behind her, the bamboo rustled lightly, not wind, but movement. Sana froze. She didn't spin around wildly. She didn't run. She simply held still and listened, letting her hearing stretch. A soft panting sound. Quick, controlled. Then a low whine, high-pitched and brief, like a signal. Sana's mouth went dry. She turned her head slowly. Between two bamboo stalks, about 20 meters behind her, something reddish-brown moved. A dog-like shape, lean and long-legged with upright ears and a narrow muzzle. It stood still, watching her. Its tail was low, not a village dog. A second shape appeared beside it, then a third, half hidden by bamboo. They were positioned like a net, one on the trail, two slightly off to the side. Sana's heart hammered, but she forced her face to stay neutral. Predators read fear in posture. She kept her shoulders relaxed and her hands visible. She didn't raise her arms like a threat. She didn't crouch like prey. "Okay," she said softly, more to herself than to them. "Okay." The nearest dhole, because now she was certain, tilted its head slightly. Its eyes were dark, attentive, not wild with aggression. It looked alert, curious, measuring. Sana remembered something her uncle had once said about wild dogs. They weren't like lone cats that watched you with silent arrogance. Packs watched you like co-workers watching a new problem, together, assessing. She slowly stepped backward off the main trail, giving them the corridor. Her goal was not to win space. Her goal was to yield it without triggering pursuit. The dhole on the trail took a step forward. Not rushing, just claiming. Sana took another step back, feet careful on leaves so she didn't slip. Her bag bumped her hip gently. She wished, sharply, that someone else was with her. She wished she had told Jorathang Clinic she might be late. She wished she'd taken the longer road, but wishes were useless now. She kept her eyes on the pack without staring directly into their eyes. Direct eye contact could be interpreted as challenge. She looked at their shoulders and paws instead, taking in their positioning. There were at least 5, maybe more hidden. A faint jingle sound should have happened as they moved past the bells. It didn't. The bells stayed silent because they had been stuffed with mud, and the pack moved through like it owned the trail. Dhole held the bamboo trail. Sana's mind clicked through her options. She could retreat fully, turn back toward Mangal. That was safest, but it meant missing her appointment in Jorathang, a pregnant woman due for a check. Sana's work mattered, but her work didn't matter if she didn't make it home. She could also climb the slope off the trail and cut through the open scrub above the bamboo. It would be harder walking, but would take her out of the narrow corridor. She chose the slope. Slowly, she turned her body sideways, showing she wasn't moving toward the pack. She stepped up, using bamboo stalks as handholds, careful not to grab too hard and snap one. She kept her movements steady and deliberate. The Dholes watched. One moved a few steps along the trail, still calm. Another slipped into the bamboo and reappeared farther ahead, keeping the same distance as if they were escorting her out rather than chasing. Sana climbed until the bamboo thinned and small shrubs replaced the tall stalks. The light brightened. She could see the ridgeline and the sky again. Only then did she stop and look down. Through gaps in bamboo she saw the pack moving along the main trail, heads low, trotting in a loose line. They weren't running, they weren't frantic, they were simply travelling, using the human-made corridor because it was efficient. And the bells, designed to warn humans, would have warned humans of exactly this, unless they were silenced. Sana's mouth tightened. She didn't like that detail. She didn't like what it implied about adaptation and learning. She turned away and moved along the upper scrub, angling toward Yorathang by a wider path. It would add 40 minutes. Her legs would burn. But she would stay in open sight lines. When she finally reached the village, sweat-soaked and dusty, the first person she saw was old Hari, the goat herder, sitting on a low wall with his herd clustered behind him. Hari squinted at her. "You came the long way," he observed. Sana nodded. "The bells on the bamboo trail are packed with mud," she said. "Silent." Hari's expression changed immediately, the way a man's face changes when a rumour becomes a fact. "Dhole," he said, not asking. Sana swallowed. "I saw them," she admitted. Hari spat into the dust, angry and afraid at the same time. "They're getting bold," he muttered. "Last week they took a kid goat near the upper stream." Sana's stomach tightened. "Why didn't anyone fix the bells?" she asked. Hari's eyes flicked away. "People said it was nothing," he said. "Rangers said the pack stays high." Sana thought of the pack on the trail, calm, organised. "They don't stay high anymore," she said quietly. Word travelled fast in villages. By afternoon, Sana's story had reached the council head, the school teacher, and the small ranger outpost near the checkpoint. A meeting was called under the big banyan tree. Men, women, teenagers leaning on motorbikes, all talking at once. The ranger, a young man named Prakash with a radio and an earnest face, listened with growing concern. "Silenced bells," he repeated when Sana spoke. "You're sure?" Sana nodded. "Mud packed inside," she said. "Several bells, not one." Prakash rubbed his chin. "Could be children," he said weakly. An old woman snorted. "Children don't pack mud in 6 bells along a trail," she said. "They have better games." Hari raised his hand. "It's the wild dogs," he said. "They learned." Prakash looked uncomfortable, but he didn't dismiss it. He asked Sana where she'd seen the paw prints and where she'd seen the pack. He scribbled notes. He promised to patrol. Promises were cheap. Sana had learned that, so she pushed for actions. "We need to clear sightlines along the bamboo trail," she said. "And we need a new warning, something they can't silence. A wire rattle, a higher bell, or a simple rule, no one walks it alone at dawn." People grumbled. People always grumbled when safety meant inconvenience. But then Sana described the pack's formation, one on the trail, others flanking. She described how they moved like they owned the corridor, and the grumbling quieted into listening. Prakash finally nodded. "Okay," he said, "we'll do 3 things." He held up fingers, counting like it made the plan more real. 1. We check the trail tomorrow with a group, not alone. 2. We move livestock away from the bamboo edge at night, closer to houses. 3. We install a simple wire rattle line across the trail at 2 points. Thin wire with tin strips that make noise when touched, hard to silence without tools. The council head added, "And we stop leaving meat scraps by the trail, because someone always did, tossing kitchen waste into the bamboo like it disappeared." Sana looked around at the faces, some fearful, some skeptical, some determined. This was how rural safety worked, not as a system, but as a community trying to stay one step ahead of what adapted faster. The next morning, Sana didn't go alone. She walked with Prakash and Hari and 2 younger men carrying sticks, not to attack, just to feel less helpless. They approached the bamboo trail in daylight, talking loudly, letting their voices fill the corridor. At the first bell, Sana showed them the mud packing. Prakash frowned and poked it out with a twig. The bell rang when freed, a thin metallic sound that suddenly felt precious. They cleared every bell they found. 6 in total, all packed. Prakash took photos for his report. Hari muttered curses under his breath. They found Dhole prints again, fresh, moving along the trail like last night's traffic. They found scat too, full of hair. Evidence, not rumour. They didn't see the pack that day, but they didn't feel safe either, because the absence of a predator did not mean it wasn't nearby. It meant it was better at being unseen. They installed the wire rattle lines at 2 narrow points and hung tin strips that would clatter loudly if something pushed through. They also raised a few bells higher up, out of easy reach, tied to thicker branches where mud packing would be harder. That evening, Sana returned to her routine: home visits, medicine checks, the steady work of keeping people alive in small ways. But she didn't forget the bamboo trail. 2 nights later, just after midnight, Hari's goats stirred and bleated nervously. His dogs began barking hard, and from the direction of the bamboo, a new sound rang out. A harsh clattering rattle, tin on wire, loud enough to wake half the village. People stepped outside with flashlights. Prakash grabbed his radio. Sana stood on her porch and listened, heart pounding. The clattering went on for a few seconds, then stopped. A moment later, one of the raised bells jingled, clear, bright, and unmistakably human-designed. This time, the warning worked. No one ran into the bamboo corridor alone. No one tried to chase shadows. The village stayed together, lights on, voices steady, making themselves large in the only way humans could. In the morning, they found the wire rattle line disturbed, tin strips bent, wire stretched. Paw prints in dust showed the pack had tried the corridor again and had hit the new warning system. They had been forced to announce themselves. Sana looked at the prints and felt that uneasy respect return. The pack was still there. It would keep travelling. It would keep learning. But so would the village, because the lesson of the silent bells was simple and sharp. When predators adapt, old safety tools become decoration. If you want the trail back, you have to redesign the warning faster than the hunter redesigns its path. And on the days the Dhole held the bamboo trail, the smartest thing humans could do wasn't to pretend it didn't happen. It was to listen, especially when the bells went quiet.